Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into something that's been kind of all over the headlines recently.
Yeah.
Breast cancer.
Definitely.
And we're seeing some pretty complicated data
Yeah.
and trends. So we're here to kind of unpack it all.
Yeah, and I think, more importantly, help you understand what it all means for you.
Exactly.
Like, what does it mean for you listening right now?
Exactly. So we've got three really interesting pieces for this deep dive. First up, a CBS News report featuring Dr. John Mashuk.
Okay.
He always breaks things down in a really clear way.
Yeah, he's great.
Then we've got a Psychology Today piece by risk perception expert David Ropake.
Okay.
That one really made me think.
Oh, interesting.
And finally, we have an Eating Wall article that dives into the lifestyle factors that we can actually do something about.
I like it. A good mix of, perspectives there.
Totally. Yeah.
Different angles.
Yeah, for sure. Now, before we get into all the nitty-gritty, let's just start with the big picture.
Yeah.
Overall, are we seeing fewer deaths from breast cancer?
So this is actually where the news is really encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
So since 1989, there's been a dramatic drop in breast cancer mortality, a whopping 44% decrease.
Wow, 44%.
Yeah, it's almost cutting deaths in half.
That's incredible progress.
Yeah.
I have to imagine that's largely due to medical advancements, right? Earlier detection, better treatments, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Early detection and treatment have been game changers.
Okay.
However, and this is where the data gets really interesting, the positive trend in mortality isn't consistent across all groups.
Okay.
For example, Native American women haven't experienced that same decrease.
Wow, that's a really important point. It reminds us that while we're, celebrating the wins, we can't ignore the disparities that still exist.
Precisely. And those disparities are something that researchers are working hard to understand.
Great.
Now, speaking of variations in the data, we have to address the other big headline we keep seeing. Rising rates of breast cancer, especially in younger women.
Yeah.
And that's understandably making a lot of people nervous.
Yeah, it definitely caught my eye too.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, okay, if fewer people are dying from breast cancer, shouldn't new cases also be going down?
Right.
So what's the explanation there?
Yeah, so it comes down to the difference between mortality, which is the number of deaths,
Okay.
and incidence, which is the number of new cases diagnosed.
Got it.
So while mortality is down overall,
Okay.
incidence has been on the rise,
Interesting.
particularly in women under 50.
So more women are being diagnosed, but more women are also surviving.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where that CBS article gets into some interesting details.
Yeah.
It highlights this trend being particularly pronounced in Asian American and Pacific Islander women,
Okay.
even though historically they've had lower rates.
That's so interesting. The article mentioned something about a study at UC San Francisco.
Yes.
Looking into this right now.
Absolutely. Researchers are working to uncover what's behind this dramatic uptick.
Yeah.
And that study is a big step in that direction.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack, and it really highlights just how complex this issue is.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is a lot to digest.
Right.
And that actually brings us to a really interesting point that was raised in that Psychology Today article.
Okay.
This whole idea of cancer phobia.
Okay.
Have you heard of that term before?
I have actually. Yeah.
Okay.
It always makes me think of those public service announcements.
Right.
The ones that are meant to be informative,
Yeah.
but then they end up kind of freaking you out a little.
Exactly. It's a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
For sure. And that's what this article digs into.
Okay.
It talks about how that constant drumbeat of bad news
Yeah.
around cancer
Yeah.
can actually backfire
Okay.
and lead to this kind of heightened sense of fear and anxiety, this cancer phobia.
Right.
That kind of goes beyond a healthy level of concern.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense because we're bombarded with information all the time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to filter out what's actually relevant to my own life and my own risk factors.
Exactly.
Right.
And the article makes this point that this kind of outsized fear can actually lead to decisions that aren't really in our best interest.
Okay.
Like seeking out unnecessary screenings or treatments.
Wow.
Or even avoiding screenings altogether.
Right.
Out of fear of a positive result.
Yeah.
Which of course could mean catching a cancer later on.
Totally, totally. It's that old saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? Or in this case, maybe a lot of information without enough context.
Yeah, without that nuanced understanding of what does it actually mean for me?
Exactly. So how do we strike that balance then?
Yeah.
Like, how do we stay informed,
Right.
but not let fear kind of like call the shots?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And that's where I think that Eating Well article comes in really handy.
Okay.
Because it shifts the focus to the things we can actually control,
Okay.
our lifestyle choices.
Okay.
And they make a pretty bold claim right off the bat.
Okay. What's that?
Exercise is the #1 thing you can do
Okay.
to reduce your risk of breast cancer.
Okay. I'll bite. Tell me more about that. Like, why is exercise so impactful?
Yeah.
Because it seems like we hear about exercise for like everything these days.
Sure.
But what's the connection with breast cancer specifically?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty fascinating when you dig into like the science of it.
Okay.
First off, maintaining a healthy weight is really crucial
Okay.
because, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, fat cells actually produce estrogen.
Oh, that's a connection I never really put together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And estrogen, as we know, can fuel certain types of breast cancer.
Okay.
And this is especially important after menopause.
Okay.
When the ovaries naturally produce less estrogen, that's when those fat cells can become like a more significant source of estrogen in the body.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So exercise helps us maintain a healthy weight,
Right.
which in turn helps to kind of like regulate our estrogen levels.
Exactly.
But it sounds like that's not the whole story.
You're right, there's more.
Okay.
Exercise also helps regulate hormones, like more broadly.
Okay.
It reduces inflammation throughout the body.
Mm-hmm.
It can even give our immune system a boost.
Wow.
All things that can play a role in cancer prevention.
Okay.
And the best part,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be anything extreme.
Okay, good.
Even moderate exercise like brisk walking a few times a week
Right.
can make a real difference.
So I don't need to like sign up for a marathon tomorrow.
No, unless that's your thing.
Yeah.
But really, it's about finding ways to move your body consistently
Mm-hmm.
that you genuinely enjoy. It all adds up.
That's really reassuring to hear.
Yeah.
Now the article also mentioned alcohol as a risk factor, right?
Yes, and this actually ties back to what we were just talking about with estrogen.
Okay.
Alcohol can actually increase estrogen levels in the body.
Okay.
So it's about being mindful of our intake.
That makes sense. It's interesting to see how all these lifestyle factors we've talked about,
Yeah.
you know, exercise, alcohol consumption, maintaining a healthy weight,
Yeah.
they all like relate back to hormonal balance in some way.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
And it highlights that it's not about like one magic bullet or a quick fix.
Right.
It's about making like these sustainable changes
Right.
that support our overall health.
Right. It
Yeah.
really does, right? Like
Yeah.
it paints this picture of how interconnected it all is.
Yeah.
You know, our hormones, our lifestyle choices, our overall health.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not about like obsessing over like every little thing.
Right.
It's more about making choices that like support that bigger picture of well-being.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what I think is so important about that is that it's empowering,
Yeah.
you know, to know that we have more control
Right.
than we often realize.
Absolutely. But we'd be remiss if we didn't like circle back to the importance of early detection, right?
Oh, absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Remember, early detection is often our best defense.
Right.
You know, and that Eating Well article really emphasized the importance of staying current with screenings
Yeah.
and having those open conversations
Yeah.
with your healthcare providers.
Yeah, it's so easy to like put those things off.
It is.
But honestly, knowledge is power, right? Like knowing what's going on
Totally.
in our own bodies
Yeah,
gives us the best chance to like take action
exactly.
if needed.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
You know, we talked about the good news,
Yeah.
about declining mortality rates,
Right.
the complexities of these rising incidence rates,
Mhm.
especially in certain groups,
Right.
and then all those empowering lifestyle factors
Right.
that we do have some control over.
Yeah. It's a lot to take in. But I feel like we've come full circle back to that idea of like
Totally.
not panicking, but being proactive,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Like we're not powerless in all of this.
Not at all. And sometimes, you know, just having the information
Right.
and that sense of agency
Mm-hmm.
can make all the difference.
I totally agree. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, here's a final thought for everyone to kind of like ponder.
Okay.
We talked a lot about like estrogen's role in breast cancer risk, but what about other hormones
Yeah.
and how those might be affected by just like the way we live today, right?
Interesting.
You know, like stress, sleep,
Yeah.
exposure to environmental chemicals.
Absolutely.
Like, could there be other hormonal links that we're just like starting to uncover
Right. It's a big question.
Yeah.
And we're only at the beginning of really understanding.
Right. It's a complex puzzle, but,
It is.
with continued research and open minds,
Totally.
hopefully we can keep putting the pieces together and create a clear path towards a healthier future
I love it.
for everyone.
Awesome.